Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the SKYLIT Books podcast. I'm your host for this episode, Justin Reamer. And we're very excited today to be discussing the book Bong Joon-ho, Dissident Cinema, with the author, culture writer and screenwriter, and the inventor of the phrase Bong Hive, Karen Han. Welcome, Karen. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm such a fan of SKYLIT, so it's an honor to come on the podcast.
I'll say the folks that buy books at our store love the books. So
that's wonderful to hear.
Yeah, I just finished it, and it gave me a good excuse to fill in my gaps in the filmography because I had never seen Mother, and I was like, well, before you spoil it, I should see Mother. So then I did, and it was astonishing. Obviously, so for listeners, Bong Joon-ho is best known as the Oscar-winning filmmaker of Parasite, which was the first non-English language film to win Best Picture at the Academy Awards. I guess the best place to start would be, so where did you first come into contact with Bong? What was your first film? How old were you? Like, what was it?
So my first Bong movie was The Host, and I think I saw it either within the year that it came out or the year after on DVD. My dad was a huge cinephile and would show me a lot of movies, just in general, like sometimes I think too early for me to be watching them. Like I remember like my first memory of watching a movie is of Amadeus, and it was so traumatizing to me because that movie opens with Salieri like trying to commit suicide, and as a child I was like, oh no, I don't understand like what's going on right now. But The Host, luckily, like I was already a teenager at that point, so I was kind of in the prime spot, I think, to see that movie. Because it just works on so many levels. Like it works as this like action monster movie, but also it has this incredible like family dynamic going on. I mean, I'm sure we'll get into his movies a little more, but that was my introduction to Bong, and I think like that movie still has a very special place in my heart because of that.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I feel like for me it was the same. Like I was introduced by The Host, and it was like, you've got to see it. It's not like any monster movie you've seen, and it was kind of like left at that, but then you're like, oh, it's not like any monster movie because there's a lot more going on.
Right,
like,
yeah.
Like, it's a movie. It's not just like genre thrills or whatever.
Exactly.
What was your initial impressions of Bong, and like how did it develop as you saw more of his films? To the point that, because you state that he's your favorite filmmaker, so how did you come to that?
Well, I tend to like movies, for better or worse, that are trying to do a lot. Like my friends like roast me a lot because some of the movies that I tend to like are like not critically that well received. Like I really loved Gore Verbinski's A Cure for Wellness. I really loved the movie like Mortal Engines that came out several years ago. Like precisely like not necessarily because I think they hit the mark, but because they're very ambitious and trying to do a lot. And I think Bong Joon-ho is an example of a filmmaker who has really big ideas for his movies and manages to pull them off. Like it's sort of like what we were saying about The Host. Like it has a monster movie level, but at the same time, like it mostly, the monster's kind of incidental to the rest of the movie, despite being kind of like the main thing that people think of when they think about that movie, because it's about like, again, this family and then these various like social strata of people helping each other. Like the idea of all of us who are quote unquote like considered like weak by society, like having to band together in order to effect change, because the larger systems that we live in like aren't necessarily going to help us to the degree that we want. It's a commentary like politically both on like the Korean government and the American military presence in Korea, and then also like a little bit the Iraq War. Like there's so much going on. It's so ambitious, and yet it lands every single one of those points pretty perfectly. And I think like all of his movies kind of do that. And the only exception I would say is probably Mother. Like that's the movie that has, I think, is the least layered, but that isn't to say it's the least complex. Like it's just because that is the rare one of his movies that really only has one lead as opposed to being an ensemble picture and like laser focuses in on that. That said, like, again, his movies kind of just keep exploring these themes to greater and richer results. So the more that I the more that I familiarized myself with his work after The Host, the more I like appreciated what he was doing and the bigger fan that I became of his work.
Yeah. Because I think that when I had only seen a few movies, like my sense of him was just that like, oh, he's the guy that kind of plots differently and like kind of surprises you in that way. But then like when you really watch it all, because your film talks about all 7 feature films plus shorts, music videos, and some other stuff. But then you see like the bigger themes, like the capital T themes, like about like the divide in class and capitalism and what it does to people. Because as you were saying in The Host, like the people that are sort of the have-nots band together, but in other films like Parasite, they fight amongst themselves to no one's betterment. And also, so what you were saying about Mother too, like, because it's the freshest in my mind.
Yeah.
It has this sort of like most seemingly straight ahead thriller plot, but like the way that you think of the mother, like change it, like initially I was so like, she's not my mother, but like she has such a like oh, that's a mother energy that like I was like heavy cringing in the beginning, and I was just like, oh, just let your son give him just. But then like when her son gets put in prison for murder, and like she starts to change, and like her soul, I guess, for lack of a better word, starts to change. And I was like, okay, all right, we needed to go from here to here to sort of like understand that. But that you sort of say that it's hard to rank his films apart from maybe putting Barking Dogs Don't Bite at the bottom, just because it's sort of like the one that even he's like, don't see it.
It's so funny that he doesn't like it though, because like I watched it again recently with a crowd, and it plays pretty gangbusters. Like people were laughing through the whole thing. It's still pretty good. It's just that I guess he is a little embarrassed of it because it's an early work.
But I was gonna say, so for personally, just because of that character journey, I think that Mother lands pretty high in my estimation of his films.
Yeah.
So so as far as like how you tackled the book, because there's a whole series of the Little White Lies Abrams books that are on different filmmakers, and they're not necessarily all like chronological, but you take the feature films in chronological, but then you also in between each sort of find cinematic influence to discuss as well. How did you sort of figure on that approach?
I wondered whether or not I should do it chronologically, just because like I'm friendly with Adam Naiman, the wonderful author of many of the other Abrams and Little White Lies collaborations, and some of his books, like he's done the movies out of chronological order rather, and kind of grouped them more closely by theme. But when thinking about the overall kind of arch of Bong Joon-ho's work, you can kind of like map out an arc, I think, as you're watching the movies in chronological order of like what interests him, what he's trying to do, and kind of increasing comfort with the kinds of things he's doing in terms of playing with genre and style, and also how much or to what extent he's exploring certain themes. So that I decided on pretty quickly, like just because like you have to start writing the book pretty quickly and get in the deadlines.
Right.
As for the influence spreads that you're talking about, those came a little bit later, and I built those mostly by seeing like what movies he would repeatedly talk about in interviews. Like sometimes he just gets asked like, what other movies have you seen this year, or being asked to participate in lists of like top 10 movies of the 20th century or my top 10 movies of all time, and seeing what came up again and again. And once I had a sort of preliminary list of those movies, I tried to go through and see like which ones I could say tied thematically to the movies that I was talking about. Some of them were pretty obvious, like Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho connecting to Mother, and then the Housemaid relating to Parasite. Some of the other chapters, it was more kind of me digging for more broadly like thematic things. Like for instance, one of the movies that I talk about is like M. Night Shyamalan's Signs, which is not something I think you would necessarily directly tie in the way that you might with Psycho. But all of these movies, like he loves to talk about himself as a student of film, and I think that's kind of how I ended up approaching it. Like, these are the artists that he admires. Like, what are those directors doing that he finds so special, and how does that relate to the work that he's doing?
It's funny that you mentioned Signs, because I think when that one came up, I was like, huh. But then when I read what you wrote, I was like, okay, all right, yeah, totally. This might be kind of silly, but like, is there one of the movies that was like the most fun to tackle, like the most fun to break down? Or...
I think one chapter that sort of stood out to me was Snowpiercer, because going into writing the book, that was the one of his movies that I was kind of the most lukewarm about. Like, I remember when I saw it when it first came out, I was like, well, okay. But then revisiting it for this book and thinking about it in the scope of his work, as in like what movies preceded it and then what came after it, it made a lot more sense to me, I think. And I also, in watching the movie again for the book, like took notice of a lot of details that I had kind of missed the first time around. Like, a lot of the humor, I think, was lost on me the first time, much to my chagrin. But yeah, revisiting it for this, I could see like what else was going on with it, and also especially with stuff like the translation aspect, which comes up kind of again and again in his work, where it comes up in Okja, where like a really crucial plot twist happens because of a mistranslation. And then even in Parasite, where these characters use English as a sort of status symbol. Like, the fact that they understand or are fluent in English is proving that they are of some pedigree. So a lot of the themes that come up again and again, like once I could sort of parse them out better in Snowpiercer, I appreciated it more.
I noticed in that one you talk a little bit about how it was a Weinstein Company movie, and Harvey Weinstein, as he famously did, was like, all right, cut 25 minutes out of this and I'll put it in like thousands of screens. And Bong refused, and so it was like, okay, you get put out on Radius on far, far fewer screens. Is that his only like real butting heads with like producers or studio executives, as far as you know? Yeah, to that extent,
certainly. Or... like, he sort of talked about this, like, where several of his movies, he's said that producers were like, you can't end the movie like this, like it needs to end differently. For instance, like Memories of Murder, which is about like a serial murder case, ends with the detectives not figuring out who did it, in part because the actual case that it was based on was open until like Parasite's press tour, which is such a strange confluence of events. But he has always stuck to his guns up to that point, and to that point, and never, I don't think, had to really defend his vision to that extent before. Certainly, yeah.
Were you thinking about this book initially, or was the book proposed to you?
The book was proposed to me. I think prior to that point, I had sort of been like, oh, it like might be nice to write a book, but I would need to write a proposal, and I don't know like who I would send it to, like who would agree to publish a book that I wrote. Kind of classic self-deprecating stuff. But it seemed like the folks at Little White Lies were thinking about Bong as someone that they wanted to tackle for one of their next books, in part because I got reached out to not too long after Parasite's Oscar win. I would say it was like maybe half a year after that or something like that. And I luckily already sort of knew David Jenkins, who is the editor who reached out to me and who I worked on the most for this book. And he was very aware of Bong Hive, as you mentioned. And so he reached out to me asking if I wanted to do this. And obviously my answer was yes, because this is it's very rare that someone asks you to write a book as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah.
It's a huge opportunity. And also, I love the books that Abrams and Little White Lies do, and the opportunity to write one on my favorite director seemed huge. Like, it was a dream come true, really.
So I was listening to some other podcasts you've done about this, and you were talking about the title, Dissident Cinema.
Yeah.
And how you like it now, but maybe it wasn't because of how it seems so politically like dissident cinema, that it wasn't necessarily what you wanted to call the book. What were some other thoughts you had?
One that I was really pushing for was Virtuoso, which ended up being nixed by one of the graphic design team because he mentioned that it's a word that sometimes has more negative connotations. But I definitely was hoping for something kind of a title that was a little more broad, like just thinking about the other titles for the books that Abrams had published. For instance, the Paul Thomas Anderson book is called Masterworks. Like, I thought that this book also deserved something kind of in that vein, especially because it was the first book in the series that was going to be published that was not about a white person, basically. I was like, I don't want this to be the first one that's not about a white director and have it be the only title that isn't kind of more grand in that respect. That said,
to go from Masterworks to
exactly.
Dissident cinema is
that said, I've definitely come around on the title. Granted, I think sometimes it does need like a little bit of explaining, but Dissident cinema for now but Dissident cinema, like now I take it to mean like in part like he is literally a political dissident. Like he took part in a lot of protests when he was a student and is kind of known to be a little bit anti-authoritarian. And at the same time, he's sort of a dissident within cinema as well. Like he keeps bucking genre convention and doing things like having these open endings and doing things that you normally wouldn't in movies, mixing tone, introducing your monster in the first like 10 minutes as opposed to hiding it. Like everything that he does is a little bit unpredictable. And to that end, I feel like he's a dissident in art as well. So that's what that title is meant to mean.
Yeah, and I think I think that's very clear in the book, and I think that it's one of those things that if it is like what does this mean, like like as you unpack it, it's like oh, okay, so it's not just a sort of shallow meaning of dissident. Like there's I think it is a pretty strong title. When you knew you were going to write the book, did you think about trying to reach out to Bong for an interview, or were you just like, that's not even going to be something I consider?
We thought about it, but in part it was because none of the other books had done that. Like we collaborated with Bong's team. Like we worked with the great producer Do-Ho Choi, who is basically Bong's right-hand man at this point, and he helped us out a lot in terms of securing not only the interviews that are in the book, but a bunch of the assets as well. But this process was sort of similar, as far as I understand, to the other Little White Lies in Abrams' book, where we would have some kind of contact with the director, where they would help with the project in some way, but wouldn't be directly involved with it.
I was gonna say, I really enjoyed the interviews in the end, just because there was so many little moments that were just like sort of shocking. Like when the film editor talks about the first time he meets Bong, they're served crab and he's allergic and just continues to eat it because he doesn't want to be impolite. Like
I know.
It's just like my throat is closing and I'm still just like pretend. But fortunately he got the job too.
I mean it's shocking to an extent, but it's also like I feel like particularly like any Korean who reads that anecdote will be like, yeah, I totally understand that, like because the like etiquette kind of demands it.
There's a really great anecdote where the sound editor is talking about combining like a piece of score with a piece of soundtrack, like music, like a recorded song. That was such an interesting thing, because that's definitely like getting into the nature of collaboration, where it's just like like it's not just like put the two songs together. Like you've got to sort of like because as you say, Bong has the nickname Bong Tail for being very detailed, but it's not sort of like a tyrannical thing. But it's just like in that moment, you're just like, I need the songs to play together in a way that creates the correct emotional response.
No, it's a funny story, like, because it sort of ends with the sound editor, like Ralph Chae-tae-young. He says, like, he kind of got so fed up at Bong, like, not quite accepting what he was giving him. It was like, oh, like, you do it. Like, you do it then. Like, you give a shot and see how you do. And Bong's sort of just kind of laughing at that instead of also getting mad or frustrated. Just be like, oh, come on. Like, you could do it. Like, you know you can do it. That's fine. And it's such a sweet story, and it seems to be the case multiple times. Like, I was talking to my mother recently, who watched a recent interview with Kim Hye-ja, the lead actress in Mother. And apparently there was a sort of similar situation where he wasn't quite getting the take that he wanted, and she got a little frustrated and was like, you show me that. And he I think she described him as a man who's like incapable of yelling, basically, and just still being very jolly about it and being like, no, like, I'm sure you can get it. So I don't know, like, every single anecdote that I hear about him just makes him seem wonderful.
And definitely his collaborators that you do speak with in the book seem to echo that as well.
Yeah.
So I guess on the flip side of my other question, was there any chapter that was daunting for any reason? Whether it's just like, oh, how am I gonna like really do the definitive chapter on Parasite or something? Like, was there anything that was daunting to approach any of the films?
I think Parasite was probably the one, like, just because it is the most well-known of his films at this point, where I wanted to make sure that everything cohered and really stood together. And to some extent, I wanted to make sure that there would be some new stuff in there, or stuff that hadn't been said already. Like, just because when a movie gets that big, the conversation around it becomes kind of endless. Like, there's a lot of material written around it, so you want to make sure that when you're writing about it, you're doing something that's a little bit different or offers a new insight into what you're writing about. And I mean, I don't know if I succeeded. I hope I did, but that's for other people to say.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very good read, and I think that you do shine a light on each of these films, even if you've seen them.
Oh, thank you very much.
That's pretty. Yeah, that's pretty special. So one of the things about the book is that it's essentially like a coffee table book. It's a larger book full of photographs. Did you have any say in which photographs were snagged for the book?
A little bit later. So a lot of it is screen caps from the movies. And the way that it went is I would submit my text, and for the first round, the design team would basically just take their own crack at it. Which is mostly informed by what I was writing. For instance, like, if a certain scene is mentioned on a page, then the natural progression is to try to get images from that scene, like, onto the page. It was only like as we were kind of nearing the more final stages of the book, where there was a spread for the entire book, where we sort of looked through and said, like, oh, like the Parasite chapter, like, we're actually missing any images of Pak Sodam, so we want to get her in there somehow, and like figuring out where to put that image, and sort of seeing, like, can we get this in higher definition for the bigger spreads, and if we can't, like, what else can we use that would be good for it. And I remember, like, one of the things that I really wanted, like, was for the Parasite spread, I really wanted the image of the basement stairs with the eyes, like, looking up from it. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But we couldn't get it in high enough definition to print, so that's why, like, the image there is the one that it is, because that was kind of like, this is our second choice for this. So it was more towards the end of the process that we got a little more nitpicky about what images were going where. But luckily, the design team at Little White Lies is so incredible. So I didn't have too much to say in the end.
I'm looking right now at Barking Dogs Never Bite, and there's an image here of it looks like a pot over fire. Yes. And then there's text on it, and then underneath it says "Friends, not food." As sort of like, maybe that's the theme of Barking Dogs Never Bite, is friends, not food.
Yeah, it was sort of...
Don't cook the dog.
Yeah, exactly. Like, each of those images, it was sort of like... Because each of the books that in Little White Lies and Abrams have done, like, they've done work not just to pick images from the movies for the chapters, but with illustrators as well, to have this kind of special kind of custom component for each of the books. And in this case, we knew, number one, that we wanted to work with Korean artists for the spread. So it's a couple of different illustrators who did the chapter title spreads and then the final illustrations. Who did really remarkable work. And in the case of the illustrations that you're talking about that end each chapter, the idea was, like, sort of trying to do something that was a little more experimental or was a little closer to protest art, just to keep in theme with the idea of dissident cinema and also Bong's history as a protester, and sort of putting in these slogans, like, kind of basically made up slogans, but ones that were thematically appropriate for the movie that they were accompanying.
Okay, that makes because it has a very sort of like protest or propaganda flavor. But then I was like, wait, was this a promo slogan I had missed or something like that? But it's it's a special. It's a special for the book. That's great.
Yes, exactly.
Are there any plans? Because Bong is working on another film now. Are there any plans when that comes out to do an expanded edition of the book, or does it stand?
I would definitely love to do more, but I would say that the precedent has kind of been not to do that. I think Abrams and Little White Lies also collaborated on the Wes Anderson books that Matt Zoller Seitz did. I remember he put out a solo book for Grand Budapest Hotel when that came out because the main book had come out prior to that. But otherwise, I don't think that has been the case for the monographs that they've done. But I mean, I'll definitely ask my editor because it would be a joy to do that.
Yeah, because there is, you talk about it too in the outro, that like it feels like this is such a sort of high point, and you're tempted to sort of be like, and this is the peak, but there's still hopefully like decades and decades of more Bong films to come.
Yeah,
and to sort of be able to continue to track the trajectory would be very exciting.
Yeah, the line on the chart will only keep going up, I think.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today.
Oh my gosh, no, thank you for having me on the podcast. It was a delight.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the SKYLIT Books podcast series. We hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to check out the book featured in this episode, or others, please visit skylitbooks.com. If you're in the Los Angeles area, stop by for one of our live in-person author events. You can find a calendar on our website. If you like this podcast, leave us a review. Really helps us out. Our music is by Duck the Piano Wire. Till next time.